I was standing in Narita Airport with a dead phone, an empty wallet, and a boarding pass that might as well have been a receipt for my own humiliation when I watched my wife glide into the Anne Suite Lounge like I was a stranger she'd accidentally traveled with. She didn't turn her head. No pause, no hesitation, just the soft click of her heels and the clean swipe of her priority card, and then the smoked glass swallowed her whole. The fluorescent chaos of Terminal 1 kept moving around me. Families dragging suitcases, businessmen talking too loudly, boarding announcements stacking on top of each other, while I stood there with nothing but my wrinkled jacket and the taste of our last argument still burning my throat. I should have followed her. I should have called her. I should have done something. Instead, I stared at the lounge door like it might open on its own and return the version of Camille who used to laugh at my dumb jokes and hold my hand in public like she meant it. The gate agent's words replayed like a loop I couldn't shut off. This ticket has been canceled. Canceled by the account holder. Not by the airline. Not by some glitch. By my wife, my partner, who had just proven she could erase me with the same casual efficiency she used to move money between accounts. I reached for my phone again out of habit, thumb hovering where service bars should be, and felt the sharp sting of panic when nothing happened. No data. No calls. No way to log into my bank, my email, my life. It wasn't just abandonment. It was isolation by design. I found a bench near Duty Free, the kind with metal armrests that made sure you never got too comfortable, and tried to think like an adult instead of a wounded husband. Embassy? I didn't even know the number. My contacts were in my phone. Credit card? Maxed. I'd spent months pretending I could keep up with Camille's version of normal, telling myself it was temporary, that my consultancy would catch up, that I just needed one more contract, one more quarter, one more year. But temporary has a way of becoming permanent when someone else controls the pace. I had $120 in cash and a passport that suddenly felt like a cruel joke, proof of identity with no power to move. Behind the glass wall, I could see our plane pushing back, the tail turning slowly as if it was deliberately taking its time leaving me behind. I imagined Camille in a private seat, champagne offered, blanket tucked, relieved to finally breathe without me asking for equality, like it was something she could hand me. That's when I noticed the woman. She wasn't wandering like a tourist. She was hovering a few steps away, like she'd been waiting for the right moment to step in. Camel coat, black dress, pearl earrings that caught the airport lights with every tilt of her head. Her posture was calm, controlled. The kind of calm that doesn't come from peace, but from practice. She walked straight toward me and stopped close enough that I could smell her perfume, something expensive and sharp like citrus and steel. "You're American," she said. It wasn't a question. I blinked up at her, confused, and she leaned in like she was about to share a secret. "Pretend you're my fiancé," she whispered. "Right now." I stared at her like she just asked me to rob a bank with her in broad daylight, because in my head, I was still trapped in the moment the gate agent said canceled and the world tilted. What was all I managed, and it came out thin and stupid. The woman didn't flinch. Up close, she looked early 40s, flawless in a way that felt intentional rather than lucky, like she'd decided years ago she would never again be caught unprepared. "My name is Evelyn Shore," she said, calm as a boarding announcement. "And in about 3 minutes, a man named Darren Kincaid is going to walk through those doors." She nodded toward the entrance to the terminal, the stream of travelers, the moving wall of bodies. "He's my ex. He's been following me for months. I thought Tokyo would be far enough. It wasn't." I should have stood up and walked away. I should have told her I wasn't security, wasn't police, wasn't anyone's hero. But the way she said following made my skin tighten. It wasn't drama. It was warning. "Why me?" I asked, and I hated how desperate I sounded, like even my fear needed permission. Evelyn's gaze flicked to my hands, still clenched, then to my scuffed sneakers. "Because you look stranded," she said simply, "and stranded people are willing to move." Her mouth tightened, just a little. "I need him to think I'm not alone." I understood before she spelled it out and felt a rush of anger at the world for being so predictable. "You want me to pretend to be your fiancé?" I said, voice low. Evelyn nodded once. "Stand next to me. Hold my hand. Look like you belong with me. That's all." She paused, then added the part that made my stomach drop. If you do it, I'll get you home tonight. Not tomorrow. Not in 2 days. Tonight. My brain tried to reject the offer on instinct. Scam, trap, insane. But my reality was a dead phone and a canceled ticket. I had no leverage. I had no options. I had pride, and pride wasn't buying flights out of Japan. How? I asked. Evelyn's expression didn't change. Because I can, she said. Because I have resources, and because I know that face. She looked at me like she could see the exact moment Camille had decided I was disposable. People don't just leave you, Jonah, she said quietly. They erase you. And when someone erases you, you don't get to be picky about the hands that pull you back into existence. A man walked into the terminal, and everything in Evelyn's body tightened like a wire being pulled taut. Tall, broad-shouldered, suit too perfect to be off the rack, hair neat enough to look military. His eyes scanned the crowd with the cold patience of a hunter. Evelyn's fingers closed around my wrist, firm, controlled. That's him, she whispered. My heartbeat turned into a drumbeat in my ears. Before I could think, she stood and pulled me with her, sliding her arm through mine with the ease of muscle memory, and lifted her voice just enough to carry. Babe, she said brightly, like we were two people with nothing to hide. Do you want coffee before we board? I swallowed the panic and forced my mouth to work. Yeah, I said, wrapping my arm around her back like I belonged there. Coffee sounds perfect. Darren's gaze snapped onto us. Confusion flashed first, then irritation, then a kind of rage that made the air feel suddenly thinner. He started walking straight toward us. Darren closed the distance fast, weaving through passengers like they were furniture, and when he stopped in front of us, it felt like the temperature dropped. He didn't look at me at first, just stared at Evelyn with that proprietary intensity that said he'd already decided how this conversation would end. Evelyn, he said, sharp and low. What are you doing? Evelyn's smile was the kind you wore to a fundraiser when someone insulted you under their breath. Darren, she replied pleasantly, as if she'd bumped into an old colleague. I didn't expect you here. His jaw flexed. Don't do that. Don't pretend this is casual. Then his eyes slid to me, up and down, measuring, dismissing, calculating. Who is he? I felt Evelyn press closer into my side, her head tilting just enough to look intimate. This is Jonah, she said. My fiancé. The word hit Darren like a slap. His face tightened, and for a second I saw something ugly flash behind his eyes. Humiliation more than anger, like the world had violated him by changing without his permission. You're lying, he said. You don't get engaged. You get bored and you come back. Evelyn's smile didn't move. That was before, she said. Now I build a life you don't have access to. She turned her eyes up toward me, cueing me without words. We got engaged in Hakone last week, she added lightly. Didn't we, babe? My mouth went dry, but I nodded like it was the easiest truth in the world. We did, I said, forcing warmth into my voice. She said yes before I even finished the question. Darren's nostrils flared. His gaze locked on me now, and it wasn't just anger. It was the look of a man trying to decide how much damage he could do without consequences. He stepped closer, enough that I could smell his cologne. Expensive, aggressive. Listen, he said, voice dropping like he was doing me a favor. You have no idea who you're standing next to. I held his stare, surprised by how steady my spine felt when my life had been collapsing just an hour ago. Maybe because I'd already been humiliated today. Maybe because fear had hit its limit and had nowhere else to go. I know exactly who I'm standing next to, I said. Someone who asked me to stand here because she doesn't feel safe. Evelyn's fingers tightened on my arm, the tiniest tremor of gratitude or warning. I couldn't tell which. Darren's eyes flicked to her hand on me, then back to my face. The corner of his mouth twitched like he was restraining a sneer. This is cute, he said. But it won't last. Evelyn's voice stayed calm. Neither did you, she replied. For a moment, I genuinely thought he might grab her. The way his shoulders shifted, the way his hand twitched at his side, it was instinct, muscle memory. Then his gaze darted over my shoulder, and I realized what he'd noticed. Cameras, staff, the steady presence of airport security farther down the terminal. The public nature of the place was a leash, and he hated it. He leaned in toward Evelyn instead, close enough that his words were meant only for her, but I still heard them. You can't keep hiding behind strangers, he hissed. Evelyn tilted her head, unbothered. I'm not hiding, she said softly. I'm moving on. Then she turned, decisive, and started walking. Her hand slid down into mine like it belonged there. I didn't hesitate. I walked with her, matching her pace, feeling Darren's stare burning into my back like a spotlight. We didn't run. We didn't look back. We moved the way people move when they have nothing to prove, like we were exactly what we claimed to be. We kept walking until the noise of the terminal swallowed Darren's voice, until the space between us and him felt like something you could measure with a ruler instead of your pulse. Only then did Evelyn loosen her grip, but she didn't let go, like she understood that the moment she released me, the illusion would evaporate and Darren would smell the truth on the air. Outside the terminal doors, winter air slapped my face, crisp and metallic, and a black Lexus idled at the curb like it had been waiting for this scene to end. The driver stepped out, opened the rear door without a word, and Evelyn slid in with the smooth confidence of someone used to being obeyed. I hesitated with one foot on the pavement, my brain screaming that I'd just gone from one stranger's control to another's. Evelyn leaned forward slightly, eyes softer now, and asked the question that cut through all my doubt. Jonah, she said, do you want to stay stranded, or do you want to go home? I got in. The door shut with a heavy, expensive thud, and the car pulled away from Narita like we were escaping a gravity well. For the first time since the gate agent's frown, I felt my lungs work again. Evelyn exhaled slowly, staring straight ahead. Up close, the polish didn't hide the tension. It framed it. Her hands were still, but her knuckles were pale. Thank you, she said quietly, like gratitude was something she rationed. You just bought me time, I swallowed. Is he dangerous? Evelyn's mouth tightened. He's not the kind of man who handles no, she said. He doesn't like losing, and he doesn't like being embarrassed, especially in public. She glanced at me, and something cold passed between us. You embarrassed him. The car merged into traffic, Tokyo's outskirts blurring into a ribbon of gray buildings and passing signs. I rubbed my palms against my jeans, trying to scrape off the feeling of Darren's eyes on my back. So what happens now? I asked. Now, Evelyn said, I keep you close until you're on a plane, because if he sees me alone again, he'll try something. She paused, measuring me. And now you tell me the truth. Her gaze sharpened. How bad is your situation? The question hit harder than Darren's threat, because it was real. It was my life, stripped down to numbers and facts, so I told her. I told her about Camille and the breakfast fight, the way she said she was tired of shrinking her life for me, like I was a burden she'd carried too long. I told her about the corporate travel account, the canceled ticket, the dead phone plan. I told her I had $120 in maxed cards and a bank app I couldn't even open. I told her the part I hadn't admitted to myself until the words left my mouth, that I'd been living in Camille's world on borrowed oxygen, and she'd finally decided to close the valve. Evelyn listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she nodded once, slow and certain. People like your wife, she said, staring out the window, don't leave. Her voice was calm, but it carried weight. They erase. Evelyn reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone like she was about to check the weather, not reroute a human life. Her thumb moved fast. 3 taps, a short text, then a call that lasted less than a minute. She spoke in a tone that didn't invite debate, the kind of tone people answer even when they don't want to. When she ended the call, she looked at me and said, My assistant is booking you a seat on tonight's flight to Los Angeles. Business class. The words hit me with a rush of relief so sharp it almost hurt. Then the shame followed immediately behind it, like it always did. Evelyn, I can't, I started, because my whole adult identity was wrapped around not owing anyone anything. She cut me off with a small lift of her hand. You can, she said, because you already paid. Her eyes didn't soften, but they did turn honest. With your pride, consider it an even trade. I sat back, stunned, watching the city slide past the tinted window. Neon signs, bare winter trees, highway overpasses stacked like concrete ribs. The Lexus smelled like leather and something clean, sterile, controlled. Evelyn's world. A world where calls got answered and problems got solved quickly, not because someone deserved it, but because someone had leverage. I hated how badly I needed it. Why are you really doing this? I asked, and I heard the suspicion in my voice. I couldn't help it. Camille had trained it into me. Every kindness came with a receipt. Evelyn stared ahead for a long moment before she answered. 6 months ago, she said quietly, I was you. She glanced at me, and for the first time the mask slipped enough for me to see exhaustion underneath. Not in an airport, not with a canceled ticket, but with a man who controlled access, money, movement, narratives. He didn't have to hit me to make me feel trapped. He just had to make sure I couldn't leave without paying a price. Her jaw tightened. I paid the price. I'm done paying it. We pulled up at a private entrance I hadn't even noticed existed when I'd arrived at Narita earlier, a side door tucked away from the crowds like a secret for people who didn't wait in lines. A uniformed staff member greeted Evelyn by name and held the door before she even reached it. The ease of it made my stomach twist. Camille had moved like this too, like the world was designed for her convenience. Only now I could see what it really was. Not elegance, but infrastructure. Evelyn walked with purpose, and I stayed at her side, my posture trying to mimic confidence it didn't feel. Inside, we passed through security so fast it barely registered. No fumbling with pockets, no barked instructions, just a smooth series of approvals. The lounge we entered wasn't loud. It was quiet in an intentional way, like silence had been purchased. Soft lighting, private booths, a wall of glass looking out at the runways. Evelyn guided me to a corner seat, then slid a bottle of water across the table toward me like she'd seen the tremor in my hands. Drink, she said. Then listen. She leaned in slightly. Your wife is already telling her version of today, and if you don't tell yours first, you'll spend the rest of your life arguing with a story you didn't write. I drank the water too fast, like my body was trying to erase panic, the same way Camille had erased my ticket, and it only made my hands shake harder. Evelyn watched me with the calm patience of someone who'd seen this exact collapse before and knew it didn't kill you. It just stripped you down. First, she said, counting off on her fingers, we fix your phone. Second, we document everything. Third, we make sure you don't walk back into the trap when you land. I opened my mouth to argue, because part of me still wanted to believe Camille wasn't a trap, that she was just angry, that she'd regret it, but Evelyn's look shut it down. A few minutes later, a staff member arrived with a small bag and a sealed box like a delivery you could only make in places normal people didn't enter. Inside was a new phone, already charged, already activated with an international plan. I stared at it like it was magic. Evelyn nodded toward it. Turn it on, she said. And don't just call her. Don't beg. Don't negotiate. Not yet. The screen lit up and instantly notifications flooded in like my life had been holding its breath. Missed calls, emails, a dozen messages from my sister. I felt my throat tighten as I scrolled, reading her frantic questions, and then I saw a text from Camille. One line, cold and clean. Where are you? Are you okay? Not let's talk. Just location, like I was an item she'd misplaced. My anger sharpened into something steadier. I called my sister first. She picked up on the second ring, voice cracking with relief. Jonah, oh my God. Camille called Mom. She's crying. She said you stormed out and left her in Japan. She said you embarrassed her and vanished. For a second, I couldn't speak. The audacity of it stole the air from my lungs all over again. Evelyn's eyes narrowed across the table like she'd predicted every syllable. She canceled my ticket, I said finally, forcing the words out slowly so I didn't sound insane. She canceled my phone. I tried to board, and they told me it was canceled by the account holder. I didn't leave her. She erased me. My sister made a small, strangled noise. Jonah, why would she? Because she can, I said, and I hated that the answer felt true. After I hung up, Evelyn slid a pen across the table and pulled a small notebook from her bag like she'd planned this. Write it down, she said. Times, gate number, what the agent said, any names you remember, every detail. I looked at her, overwhelmed. What's the point? She has money lawyers, and you have facts, Evelyn cut in. Facts are heavier than money when you stack enough of them. She leaned closer, voice low. People like Camille win by moving first, by telling their version before anyone asks questions. You're not going to let her do that anymore. I started writing, my handwriting jagged at first, then steadier as the timeline formed. Breakfast in Ginza, the exact words Camille used. The walk through Narita, the canceled ticket, the dead service. Even Darren's face because suddenly I understood something. Power didn't just trap you with money, it trapped you with isolation and shame. Evelyn watched me fill the page, then nodded once like she'd seen a pulse return. Good, she said. Now listen carefully. Her voice hardened. When you land in Los Angeles, you do not go home. You do not meet her to talk. You stay with someone who is yours, not hers. Otherwise, you're stepping right back into a room where she controls the doors. Her words hit like a slap because they were exactly what I didn't want to hear. Home was still a word that pulled at me, even after everything. Home was my toothbrush, my bed, the familiar creak in the hallway floorboards, the idea that if I just got back into the apartment and sat across from Camille at our kitchen island, we could rewind this whole day and start over with better sentences. But Evelyn didn't speak like someone offering advice. She spoke like someone reading a weather report. If you walk back in there, she said, you're volunteering to be managed again. I stared at the notebook in front of me, at my own handwriting spelling out the details of my humiliation, and I felt something inside me tighten, grief, anger, and a thin thread of clarity twisting together. I don't have anywhere else, I said quietly. Most of the people in my life came through her. Evelyn's mouth tilted, not quite a smile. Then today is the day you find out who's actually yours, she replied. A message pinged on the new phone. Evelyn's assistant, confirming my seat, the flight number, the departure time. Business class tonight. It was real. My chest loosened and immediately snapped tight again with another thought. Camille will know. She'd see my phone come back online. She'd call. She'd flood me with messages. Rage, tears, blame, affection, whatever tool worked fastest. As if on cue, my screen lit up again. Camille? Calling. The name sat there like a dare. I hovered my thumb over the answer button because a part of me still wanted to hear her voice, still wanted some explanation that would make this make sense without changing who I believed she was. Evelyn didn't reach for my phone. She didn't tell me what to do. She just watched me with that steady, unblinking gaze and said, if you answer, you'll spend the next hour trying to convince her you deserve basic decency. My finger froze. I let it ring out. Camille called again, then a text. Stop being dramatic. Come to the lounge. We'll talk. Dramatic. Like my ticket hadn't been canceled. Like my phone hadn't been cut. Like I hadn't been turned into a stranded problem she expected to solve when it was convenient. I felt heat climb my throat, but underneath it was something calmer, something I hadn't felt in years. Refusal. I typed back slowly, every word deliberate. I'm safe. Do not contact my family again. We'll communicate through attorneys. I stared at the message for a second before hitting send, half expecting my hand to shake. It didn't. Evelyn watched the screen, then nodded once. Good, she said. That's a boundary, not a plea. She leaned back and finally let her shoulders drop, like she'd been carrying my panic along with her own. Outside the lounge window, planes slid across the runway, steady and certain, and for the first time all day I felt something like forward motion inside my chest. Evelyn reached into her bag and slid a business card across the table toward me. A law firm name embossed in black. No frills. All authority. He's a family attorney, she said. He owes me. Call him the moment you land. Tell him exactly what happened. Don't soften it. Don't protect her image. She held my gaze. People like Camille rely on you being polite while they're being ruthless. When boarding time approached, Evelyn walked with me through the quiet corridors reserved for premium passengers, her pace unhurried but purposeful. I realized she wasn't doing this because she enjoyed rescuing strangers. She was doing it because she recognized the pattern, and she refused to watch it repeat. At the gate, she stopped and looked at me like she was making sure I understood the real exchange. I got you out, she said softly. Now you keep yourself out. I nodded, gripping the notebook and the phone like they were proof I still existed, and stepped onto the jet bridge with a strange, fierce thought burning in my mind. Camille had tried to erase me, but she'd accidentally taught me the one thing I needed most, how to stop asking permission to be treated like a person. The cabin smelled like warm towels and expensive cologne, a carefully engineered calm that felt almost insulting after the day I'd had. I slid into my business class seat and sat there for a second without moving, like my body didn't trust comfort anymore. The flight attendant offered champagne, and I almost laughed. 12 hours ago, I'd been arguing about respect over miso soup, and now I was being handed a crystal glass as if I belonged in this world. I declined and asked for coffee instead. Something familiar. Something that wouldn't make this feel like a dream I'd wake up from back on that metal bench outside duty-free. When the plane pushed back, I watched the lights of Narita drift away through the window and felt a pressure behind my eyes that had nothing to do with jet lag. I wasn't crying for Camille. Not exactly. I was grieving the version of myself who thought love meant enduring whatever the other person decided was normal. Once we leveled off, I pulled out the notebook and the new phone and kept writing, not because I enjoyed reliving it, but because writing it down made it solid. It turned feelings into facts, timestamps, gate numbers, the exact phrasing the agent used. The moment I checked for service and found nothing. Camille's texts, the call logs. Every detail felt like a brick, and I was building a wall she wouldn't be able to talk her way through. My sister texted again. "Mom's freaking out. She thinks you're missing." I swallowed hard and called my mother. When she answered, her voice shook. "Jonah? Oh, thank God. Camille said you disappeared. She said you left her there." "Mom," I interrupted gently, forcing my tone to stay calm. "I didn't leave her. She canceled my ticket and shut off my phone. I'm on a flight home right now." Silence, then a small gasp. Why would she do that? My grip tightened on the phone. "Because we fought," I said. "And because she could." I didn't add the part that mattered most, that maybe she'd been waiting for a moment to prove I was optional. I just told my mom I was safe, that I'd explain everything later, that she didn't need to answer any more calls from Camille. When we hung up, my hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't panic. It was rage held in a careful container. Somewhere over the Pacific, Camille's messages started coming in bursts. "You're making this worse. Stop embarrassing me. We can fix this if you just listen." Then inevitably the softer hook. "Jonah, please." I stared at the word please and felt something inside me go cold. It wasn't remorse. It was strategy. She wasn't asking because she understood what she'd done. She was asking because she'd lost control of the board. I didn't respond. I turned my phone to airplane mode, even though it already was, like I needed the physical act of silencing her. I thought about Evelyn, sitting somewhere else on this aircraft, or maybe on another one entirely, returning to her own fight. She hadn't promised to save me forever. She just handed me tools and told me to use them. That was the difference between her and Camille. Evelyn offered help without demanding ownership. Camille offered comfort with strings wrapped so tightly I didn't notice them until they cut. When the captain announced our descent into Los Angeles, my stomach tightened again, not with fear of flying, but with the weight of what came next. Landing didn't mean resolution. It meant the real battle was about to start. Lawyers, narratives, phone calls, tears, threats. But for the first time, I wasn't stepping into it empty-handed. I had a plan. I had documentation. I had a boundary already sent into the world like a flare. And as the coastline appeared beneath the clouds, bright and indifferent, I made myself a promise I'd never made before. I would not go back to being a passenger in my own life. Not for love, not for comfort, not for anyone. A lax hit me like a wall of noise and motion the second I stepped off the jet bridge. Announcements echoing, luggage wheels rattling, people rushing like they were late to lives that still belonged to them. I stood for a moment in the flow of travelers and felt the absurd urge to look for Camille, even though I knew she wasn't there. Even though she was probably already home, telling a polished version of today to anyone who would listen. Old habits die hard. Even betrayal doesn't erase muscle memory. I followed the signs to baggage claim, gripping my notebook and the business card Evelyn had given me like they were talismans. My phone buzzed again. Camille. Another text. "Where are you? We need to talk now." The word need made me laugh under my breath. Not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. She didn't ask how I'd gotten home. She didn't ask if I was safe. She demanded access like access was the thing she'd married. I didn't answer. Instead, I stepped out of the crowd and called the number on Evelyn's card. A receptionist picked up, crisp and professional, and within minutes I was speaking to a man whose voice sounded like he'd made a career out of not being surprised. "Mr. Pierce," he said after I explained, "I want you to email me your timeline immediately. Screenshots of any messages. If you have names of airline staff, include them." Do not return to the marital residence tonight. Do you have a safe place to stay? The fact that he asked safe instead of comfortable made my stomach twist. I thought of my apartment, the one with Camille's art on the walls, Camille's taste in every corner, Camille's name on half the paperwork. My friend Marco, I said, because saying it out loud made it real. I can stay with him. Good, the attorney replied. And Mr. Pierce, do not meet her alone. Not to talk. Not to clear the air. If she wants communication, she can do it through counsel. Understood? I swallowed. Understood. When I hung up, I had an odd sensation, like someone had finally put a railing on a staircase I'd been falling down for years. I texted Marco, "Can I crash tonight? Don't ask yet. Just yes or no." His reply came fast, "Yes. Doors open. You okay?" I stared at the question and realized how long it had been since someone asked me that without it being a negotiation. "I will be," I typed back. At baggage claim, my suitcase rolled out like nothing had happened, like I hadn't been reduced to a canceled barcode 12 hours earlier. I hauled it off the carousel and started walking toward the exit. That's when I saw her name again. Camille calling this time, not texting. My thumb hovered over decline. A part of me wanted answers. Another part wanted to hear remorse. But Evelyn's voice cut through the temptation. If you answer, you'll spend the next hour trying to convince her you deserve basic decency. I hit decline, then opened my notes and added a new line. 7:42 p.m. Camille called. Declined. Outside, California air wrapped around me, warm compared to Tokyo's bite. It should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like the beginning of a different kind of fight. I loaded my bag into a rideshare, slid into the back seat, and watched the airport fade behind us. My phone buzzed one more time, a message from Camille. "If you don't come home tonight, don't bother coming at all." I read it twice, then typed my only response, short and final. "Then we're done. My lawyer will be in touch." I hit send, and for the first time since Narita, my hands didn't shake at all. Marco lived in a small 2-bedroom near Echo Park, the kind of place with mismatched furniture and plants that were somehow still alive, despite the fact that he was never home. When I knocked, he opened the door in sweatpants and a hoodie, took one look at my face, and stepped aside without a single question. That alone nearly broke me. No interrogation. No "what did you do?" Just space. I walked in, dropped my suitcase by the couch, and stood there like I didn't know what to do with a safe room. Marco handed me a glass of water and said, "Sit." The word wasn't harsh, but it was firm in that friend way that says, "I'm not letting you spiral in my living room." I sat on the edge of the couch, water trembling slightly in my hand, and for the first time all day, the adrenaline drained enough for exhaustion to hit. My body felt heavy, like someone had poured wet cement into my bones. "So," Marco said, finally, lowering himself into a chair across from me, "tell me the version that won't make you protect her." I stared at the water and let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped in my ribs since Ginza. Then I told him, the breakfast fight, the words Camille used, the canceled ticket, the dead phone, the way she called my mother to claim I'd abandoned her. Marco didn't interrupt once. He just listened, and I watched his face change from confusion to disbelief to something sharp and angry. When I finished, he leaned back and ran a hand over his mouth. "That's not a fight," he said slowly. "That's a power move." The phrase landed in my chest like a stamp. Power move. Not misunderstanding, not drama, strategy. My phone buzzed again on the coffee table, lighting up the room with Camille's name. I didn't even pick it up. Marco glanced at it and snorted. "You gonna answer?" "No," I said, surprised by how certain my voice sounded. "My attorney told me not to." Marco nodded like that was the only sane thing he'd heard all night. "Good," he said, "because if she gets you on the phone, she'll twist you into apologizing for being wronged." He wasn't wrong. Camille could make a person doubt gravity if she spoke long enough. I pulled out the notebook and laid it open on the table, showing Marco the timeline I'd written, the times, places, details. He whistled softly. "You're serious." "I have to be," I said. "She's already telling a story where I'm the villain." Marco's eyes narrowed. "Then you tell yours first." He reached for his laptop without asking, opened it and turned it toward me. "Email your lawyer everything tonight," he said. "Screenshots too. And, Jonah, you're not going back there tomorrow." The certainty in his voice startled me. "I have clothes there. Work stuff. My Your stuff can be replaced, he cut in. Your dignity can't. He paused, then added quieter, and if she can cancel your ticket like that, she can do worse when you're alone in a room with her. That sentence sat in the air between us, heavy and undeniable. I thought about Camille's text at the airport. Stop being dramatic. I thought about her calling my mother. I thought about the way she demanded my location, like I was property. For the first time, I let myself say it without softening it. I don't think she loves me, I whispered. Marco didn't try to comfort me with lies. He just nodded once, slow, and said, "Then it's good you're finally listening." If there's one lesson this story teaches, it's this. Never confuse access with love. When someone controls your money, movement, or voice and calls it help, you're not being supported, you're being managed. Pay attention to moments when respect disappears before affection does, because that's where the real danger begins. Document what happens to you, even when it feels uncomfortable, and don't let anyone rush you into silence for the sake of peace. Most importantly, understand that walking away from control isn't failure. Sometimes losing everything that kept you small is exactly how you get your life back.